Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Langshack. We have another presentation today on Lenape. So, this presentation is going to be mainly topics that weren't discussed in the first Lenape presentation. So, today we're going to be talking about adverbs in Lenape, which are now, since the making of this presentation, I've realized function exactly the same way as adjectives do in this language, whenever they're standalone anyway. But that's fine. Oftentimes, parts of speech of this language can be kind of trippy because they can act as other parts of speech, and that's even when the Germans were writing their grammars on this language in the 1800s. It oftentimes parts of speech just flowed into other kinds of parts of speech. So it's that's just the polysynthetic nature of these agglutinative languages. Anyway, we'll continue on to the obviation secondary forms, and we'll talk about absentative forms, which is an interesting concept I haven't seen in many languages before. And we will also talk about sentence construction, or how you can connect different stems together to create meanings in this language. So, adverbs in Lenape. So, adverbs in Lenape are essentially verbs. They come from suffixes. However, whenever you're combining these with verbs, you have to keep in mind that they always go in front of the verb. So, for example, you may see here "ota milachenusa," which means slowly unties the horses, and "ota mixu," slowly talks or talks slowly. So you could ask somebody, if you're just trying to ask somebody to speak more slowly because they're talking too fast, you could say something like "Ki kaskihaj ota mixu." Can you speak slowly? Or "aloi," which means more, "aloi ota mixu." And they always go in front of the verb. So kusha means quickly. Kusha mahela means to run quickly. And another example here. So in the last slide we had "we kusha mehole," which means he or she runs quickly. And you could also replace that same thing. You could say "we ota mehole" if you wanted to as well. And the same goes for this. So he runs quietly or she runs quietly. "We chitgo," or we chitgo mahele. "We kima mahele." He runs secretly or without anybody knowing. So pretty straightforward. And we'll be moving on now to the obviative verb forms. So obviative verb forms are pretty simple. They're simply just a secondary or tertiary object to the sentence. So if something is not the main subject, then generally you would be putting that obviative suffix on that. So the suffix "all," which this is Mission Delaware spelling. This is usually only marked with simply an "ah" because the "ah" has the "all" sound. And sometimes this can also be an "ua," depending on if the word ends in a vowel or not. So mimens, mimensa, children, mimensa are children in the obviative. And then also, if obviation, it can also be used if the animate noun is possessed by the third person, like, for example, "his doctor," "her doctor," for example. That would take the obviative in a sentence like that. And then there's also the participles. So participles like "io" and "li." You may see these words with the "e" at the end. Gishikit, or "kishikilichi." Those who are born. Gishikilichik, those who are born. And then "gishikit," those one who is born. But having this "kishiki," having that "eel" there turns it into an obviative for the sentence. So you see, it's a little bit difficult to see here because everything is German spelling convention, and there's like 4 different letters for for one sound. So this ch, so that's just chi, and you can see this li right here. So kishiki, just like kishiki, and then the t, and you put this eel right there. You see that eel right there between kishiki and chi. That would be the how to mark the obviative in a word like that. And there's a lot of words like that in Lenape that are like one who is born, one who cures people could be a doctor. But that's just how you would create new words in many of these polysynthetic languages. This is how it would work for Aleut, from languages from Aleut all the way to Chickasaw. They're always going to be this way, where the specific language's rules for how they connect these words together and how they do grammar is always going to be just simply another stem or another participle in the word. If that makes any sense, I hope that makes sense. So there's also some other examples. So these are a little bit more. It makes it easier to see it. So in the Talking Lenape dictionary, oftentimes there's 2 demonstrative adjectives that you're going to see that will always precede a word that has the obviative suffix on it. So for example, naka. Naka means that, but it's specifically for anime people who used to be alive. So ahinu or ahinu naka lenua. He was a great man. So lanua can also be used for a man in the obviative who is still alive. So for example, there was another sentence I saw, I don't know, but something like Wichamau na lenua. The man helped him, or the man helped her, something like that. Oftentimes you're going to see verbs in u or o whenever there's an obviative that's going to come after that, because that signifies that they were doing something to someone else, and it kind of shows you that there's more than one subject in the sentence. So another example with a deceased animate object or a deceased animate person is, because this can also be used for animals as well. So you could say Noe haluk naka inkahisa. So my late mother named me. So naka can also function as that, or as a, what do they call those? Definite articles. So these can function as definite articles in sentences as well when you have this obviative suffix. That's at least how the translation has come out in many cases. And then Lenape sentences will often use nel, which it means that, and that in the obviative, and it also means those, but those is, I don't think they use those with the obviative in this context. So it's only going to be used for that if you're using the obviative. So David waneo nel Lucia. So David sees Lucy, and there's a lot of words like that where you're going to see the verb ends in yo, or has a o in there to signify that it's he, she, or it. That it's that that the verb is acting with, or in conjunction with. So it's una is to see. The wa makes it him, and then the o could be either signifying that it's Lucy that he's seen, or it can also just simply, in most verbs, when you have just the o at the end, you don't need a w, you don't need a wa sound, because it just means he or she saw. But since there's an object after it, Nell Lucia, they put this. You got to say it this way, with the wa. And then you have aweni. I just wanted to put this example here because this word is a very common word in Lenape. Awen means who. It can mean like a person, somebody, someone, all of that. And awenik, if you add a K after it, it means everybody or people. Well, wemi awen is everybody, but awenik means people in general. So an awen by itself just means the normal nominative form of that. But if you put aweni, then that turns it into the obviative form. All right, and now we'll be moving on to the absentative noun forms. So the absentative is an interesting concept to me because I've seen certain things like in the Polynesian languages, some of the Polynesian languages, like when someone passes away, They don't use that word. Like they try not to use their name anymore because it's sacred now, or it just cannot be used because they're no longer with them. And then you sometimes have languages where like even certain numbers have been changed because somebody with that name passed away. So it's not really, it's not exactly the same as that. It's more like it's just simply a suffix that deals with deceased entities or entities that are absent or just missing. They're not there anymore. So it would be kind of similar to alienability, except this is something that you add on specifically to something that's not there. It's not, it maybe was a part of you or a part of your life, but it's no longer there. And so you would put that. I haven't found any examples of this, of real life beings who have just simply disappeared from someone's life, or they're just not there anymore. I've only seen the suffix being used for deceased beings. So death, physical absence, or elimination or loss. I don't have any examples to show the second two, minus somebody not being no longer in the world. So deceased people. So this can be nkake, it could be kake, and the yun kake is just yun plus kake. Yun means this, the demonstrative pronoun this. And then you have kake. And then another really cool thing, which you'll see in another slide, more examples of this, are how you can also add unka to numbers as well. And so in this one, I'll show you some other ways that you can mark absence on nouns. So for example, a noun, some really easy ones are a crow, a hus, and an ahasa, a dead crow. And then if the noun is inanimate, you add an e. So utane, a town. This is misspelled, but it's not a standardized language. Utane, and then utaneye, a former town. That could be a ghost town. That could be something that some ruins you find, a former gray town, something like that. It could be used for any of those things, and probably even an old village. And then you have umma, which you can use for both plural. I'm sorry, yeah. You can use in the plural for both animate and inanimate, meaning something that is alive or something that isn't considered alive, like grass. Grass is considered to be an inanimate object, but a live tree is considered an animate object. So this will change for every language. Some languages might see a tree as an inanimate object because it's not running around or making sounds or noises, and some languages might consider that to be an animate noun. So it really depends on the language. But in Lenape, that's how it works. So askik and then askiwunga, withered grasses, or grasses that are like yellow, brown, dying away. And as I mentioned earlier, you may see this as unka, nikake. I also have a few more forms on my partial Lenape word book that I've been saving some things in. There's several other variances of this stem or root. And then the last part of this topic I wanted to talk about was counting the deceased. So as I mentioned in the first slide of this specific topic, one of the really fascinating things about this absentative, which is already an interesting concept to me because it's not something I've seen in a lot of languages. I've never studied a language with this grammatical concept before in the first place. But this language, you can add tahunka or unka to a word, to the end of a word. And so, for example, nishunka, 2 people who are deceased or 2 deceased beings, 5 deceased palanach. So palanach means 5. So there's going to be some times when you have to use tahunka instead of just adding unka to the word. I don't know if this is because the word ends in a vowel, and so nisha becomes it's already changing its composition because nisha becomes nishunka, palanach tahunka, telon Tachanunka, or if you're in Ontario, Delaware, this would be Wingbolt, probably Tachanunka. And then examples of this. So I was only able to find 2 attested examples, but Nayunka, which can also be Nawunka, as seen in that other slide, both mean there were 4 of them, animate deceased beings. And then 7, Nishash, Taka nunca. So now on to probably the most difficult part to explain, how to create a polysynthetic clause from various stems. So Lenape, as most indigenous North American languages operate, they are agglutinative. It is possible to break these stems and have it function as a sentence that is very similar to English, where you break every word down. It is possible to do that in Lenape. You can. It probably is easier for people who are learning it, who come from a European language background. But it's more common, or at least I imagine it was more common further back you go in time, especially in the historical works. Like if you look at biblical, the Moravian works, and you look at the Lenape, all the words are pretty much like that. They're all, you have some standalone words like adverbs and such, but most words are going to be, they're going to be large glumps, which is, they're usually translate something as like one who does this thing, or he who gives us life, he who makes us live, is like the translation of Jesus Christ the Savior in those works. So just to give you an idea of how they've created new meanings from things, and they may have entire sentences in what is to us like we have to say a whole sentence, and they can say that in like one word. So it really, it can be one or it can be the other. But in this language, the way that the structure is done generally is you have two different kinds. You have either a noun or you have a verb. Because if you have a question particle, it's going to be separate from the stem entirely. If you have a bound preposition, it's only going to attach to a noun, or when the word is a noun. And if you have a circumfixed verb conjugation, that's obviously only going to work in a noun. So that's why I'm going to try to explain this from the noun point of view and from the verbal point of view, because there's two different ways to create these long words that are entire sentences or clauses. So we'll talk about, let me just look quickly at this. Okay. Okay, so quick example. Okay, so we have two examples in this one right here, but I'll just say that if you have a verb, then it's going to function like this. You will put your subject, you're going to put your subject around the verb, right? So if you have a singular verb like I, you, he, she, or it, then there's not going to be anything that comes after the verb. So we kusha mahela. He or she runs. And if this were a he or she, you don't have to put the we. You could say kusha mahelu if you wanted to, because there's two different conjugations for the third person singular. If it's a first or second person singular, then you'll just do ni or ki. So nothing there. You don't have to put anything else, and that's it. And if you're doing plural, then if you look at the second example here, we have kima sakwalindam uhamo. So uhamo is the second plural circumfix that goes around the verb. So sakwalindam means that you're depressed or you're sad. Kima means secretly. So maybe this is like somebody was being sad secretly. Nobody knew that they were sad. So, and you're asking a group of people. So if you want to say sakwalindam, you feel sad. Kima sakwalindam, secretly feel sad, right? You could say kima sakwalindamu, he or she secretly feels sad. Now you want to ask a whole group of people, if you're dealing with we, you all, or they, now you have to put it around the verb. There's obviously exceptions, but it's very rare that it's not going to be a circumfix. Okay, so you're gonna put your we, you're gonna put your ni, your ki, or your we at the front, depending on what pronoun you're using, and after it, you'll say humo. So humo is for you all, and huna is for the first person singular, or sorry, the first person plural. So we. So for we or us, it's going to be huna. And again, for y'all or for you all, it's going to be humo. And for they or them, it's going to be awo. Usually it's going to be awo or wok or yok. One of those three things, those three endings, depending on what it is. And so now you kind of have an idea, right? So you put your verb, you put your first part of your verb stem, you put your adverb or your adjective because they function exactly the same. And then you have your verb, right? And then after your verb, you may have to put the harmonizer between the verb and the second part of the circumfix for verbs. And then you mark your tense at the end. So after that part, then you're going to put, so humop, the p at the end of a verb means that it's past. If it has a chi, that means it's future. There's other ones, like for example, you may see pe before the verb, which indicates that it's gerundive, or that it's ing and it's going on right now at this moment. So there's other things you can add, but most for the basic present, past, future tenses, that's you're going to put that directly after it, and you don't even have to put it in there. You can just say it in Lenape with a random time word, and people will understand that you're talking about that time. You don't even have to add the tense if you don't want to. And so for nouns, it's a lot simpler. So for nouns, we could use sakulindum because sakulindum is simply a stem that means sad or depressed, something like that. So sakwe and lindam means to feel. There's another word, malsi, that you could use, but lindam, you can't use malsi with this kind of word. Lindam goes with, it's more emotional in nature. So sakwe lindam, which is going to connect it to the next word. Wakan. Wakan. So wakan is one of several nominalizers or things that can change the verb it changes the stem into an explicit noun. You can also do aokan, which not for this word, it just depends on what the word is. Some words may have this aokan, it may have akan, it may have the relative form, which is basically you're going to add the circumfix. It's a circumfix that goes around the stem, and you would have like and then after the stem you might put like eat. So esakulindamit would be, it could be like one who is sad, or it could be like a simpler way of saying depression instead of sakulindam ewakan, and then after the nominalizer of an explicit noun, you can add a stem after that. So I call these bound prepositions. There's not a lot of them in the language. There's like ke and que, which is used in the word pahake. Pahakwe is noon, and pahakwe can mean either afternoon or for the afternoon. And then you can also use ink or unk, which is extremely common. It's used all the time. It's marked as an ablative case, but it's like off, on something, in something, to a place. And then you also have li, which is another one that you might see less rarely. You're going to see it a lot in Moravian biblical works because they were translating from German a lot of the time. And those will go after the nominalizer or the relative form or whatever other way, because there's also te, like for example, lao tu means to cost, like how much something costs. Like kecha lao tu means how much, kaka lao tu means how much does this cost. So you could say lao tu and allow, so lao tik means the price. So taking that, so that's just an example, right? You also have another way to say it with, it's like to lao tu. Yeah. So you could put te, you could put te in front and put u, which is the same, that's the same suffix that you would use for the third person after a verb if you're not using the we. And you can also use that after the alautik. So it could be alautikink. You could say talautunk. So I'm just trying to give you other examples of how you might use different types of nominalizers or different types of words that are explicitly marked as nouns with a stem in the middle of it that is the central part of the entire sentence that can act. That stem can function as any part of speech that you want it to be. So sakwe by itself could mean sad. Somebody could do something sadly. Somebody like lasin means to do something. Somebody could say sakwe. Somebody could say something like sakwelesi could mean somebody did something sadly or somebody did something in a sad way. It's possible. It's certainly possible to do that. You don't have to put lendam there. But it's really complex. We could talk about this specific topic for hours, but I just wanted to get this. I just wanted to talk about this because it's something somebody asked me to do this for the Nahuatl language a long time ago, and I was thinking about, I could explain how this is done in Lenape, so I decided to do it for this language. But anyway, I hope this explanation makes sense. Hopefully, with the examples and the colors and the parts of speech, it makes a little bit more sense to you. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. You can always go to langshack.club and go to the forums and ask there. You can ask in the comments or just email. You can just email me as well. I'm always around. I'm here to ask questions, and hopefully y'all enjoy this Kahela Wanishi. And I will see everybody in the next video.